My name is Kara McLuckie, and I'm a professor at St. Lawrence University in Canton, New York. And first, I want to say a big thanks to Women's Networking Zone for having me here, and to PATA Nigeria for bringing me along as part of their project. We're currently working on SRH curriculum development for adolescents, and I am part of that writing project. So I've been here doing a little bit of research, but I'm happy to share what I know in terms of my own writing practices with you. And the first point that I think I want to make is that it says creative writing practice. And even if you are working on a project that is business writing, or if you're working on a project that's strict journalism, creative writing is integral in the process of doing activism. It's key in processing the kind of experiences that you have that you might use as the basis for your writing, whether it's fiction, nonfiction. It's key in perhaps healing and dealing with and coping with grief or other trauma. But I think more generally, it's quite important in the process of thinking and clarifying and really getting to the heart, literally the heart of a matter. That means getting to the intangible aspects of what your experiences are, or in some cases what the experiences of others are. As perhaps activists or people that are interested in telling your story and the stories of others, understanding that there's the emotional component to those stories is going to be very helpful. And let me just give you a quick example. It's easy to tell a story in a plot, right? And a plot usually works on a forward motion of time. And we can have something like, the king died and then the queen died. That's a story. But perhaps a better story might be, the king died and then the queen died of grief. And what we have there is something that's a little more meaningful because we've added a motivation. We've added a sense of emotion. We've explained why it is, in a fairly dramatic fashion, why it is that the queen died. So again, getting to that heart of the matter is something that's key. And one of the ways that you can do that is by using a creative writing practice rather than simply jotting down in sort of a plot or a time-bound fashion your experiences or the experiences of others. And I propose that there are actually three sources for doing this effectively, for developing your creative writing in an effective fashion. One of them is listening to others. Okay, listening to others, and that has a whole host of skills that goes along with it. And one of those skills that we're going to practice together today is simply a bit of analysis. I'm going to have you read a short piece, and then put your intuition and your mind to work. And think about whether or not and how the writing that you've just read works. What do you like about it? What do you hate about it? What seems poignant to you? Where is the motivation? The kinds of questions that you ask yourself, you want to ask yourself as you're reading anything. Because your main sources, aside from your main sources, are going to be other people. Read everything, read anything, but read it with a sense of how can I use this? Does this work? Is this a style that might work for me as a writer? So listening to others, that's the first leg, first source. Listening to yourself, of course, your own intuition about what story you want to tell and how you want to tell it is clearly going to be one of your greater sources. Listening to yourself, again, kind of ties back into this idea of listening to others or reading others. Does this work for me? Do I like this story? What do I like about it? These are the kinds of questions that you'll ask yourself repeatedly as you go through the process of beginning and developing a creative writing practice. And lastly, the third source for effective creative writing, or any writing really, but particularly creative writing, is going to be working consistently. How do I fit some writing into my busy schedule? What does fitting writing into my busy schedule look like? What do I mean by writing? How can I work consistently? So that's why I use the more general term work. How can I work consistently? What can I do to continue to jog my mind, to keep myself active, to use these practices to kind of focus me as a writer and start to look at the world as a writer? as opposed to a sort of a passive recipient. We're going to look at some creative nonfiction examples, and we will perhaps, if we have some time, talk a little bit about collecting the voices of others. In other words, if you are working in an activist setting, now that we're starting to look at ways of critiquing methods and treatments and access and so on and so forth. If you're trying to find the stories in your community about how those things are working, if they're working, and then you want to turn around and present them, say, at a policy meeting, or if you want to turn around and present them at a conference such as this, how do I collect those voices and then represent them respectfully? And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about some tips for publishing your work, particularly from the activist perspective. Where can I go? What can I do? Once I've started down this journey of doing my creative writing practice, how can I then use the voice that I've developed for myself or the voices of others to make that work? Where are some spots where activist writing or early writing, early creative writing is acceptable and interesting? Okay. Morolake is going to have a few things to say. She is kind of our writer in practice here.
Okay, I think most of us, well, let me speak for myself. I dream of publishing. I dream of writing something, writing a book. And I think the biggest problem is, how do I even begin to write? And who's going to read it? And how am I going to put it together? And so I've always seen writing as something that is just very difficult. And which is why we're saying, okay, what is it that we can do and how can we begin to write? Knowing that it's something that most of us really would like to do. The very first writing that I got published in November of 2003, 9th of November 2003, my very first article was published in the Punch newspapers. There's Punch on Sunday. It's a Nigerian newspaper, and I was surprised at how well that was received, because I had titled that Living with It, in moments like this, Living with HIV. I really wasn't sure what to expect, because it meant I was not just talking in small circles about living with HIV, but hey, I was going to be publishing about living with HIV. And I must say that that has been the turning point in my life. Also, it gave me some kind of celebrity status, you know, when people would say, oh, I've read so much about what you've written, and suddenly I began to think, oh, maybe my story really does matter. So I might think it's just me, but I think it just might be making a difference to somebody else. And people would say, people I've never met before, I don't know, would walk up to me and tell me, you know, when I got tested, I wasn't so scared because I had been reading your article. And I realized that it's possible to live with HIV rather than die from HIV, which is why I still dream of publishing and writing something and publishing. But I think, like Kara said, the first thing is where and how do we even start? And you don't have to be a university professor. You needn't have studied English language or just have any high-flying thing. Any person can write. 15-year-old Dio can write if she chooses to write. It's just you writing your own story from your own perspective. And I think that's what Kara is going to help us with today.
So to move us along a little bit, the first leg, the first source for your writing practice, listening to others. As I said before, read everything, look everywhere. Anything can have something that sparks an idea and becomes a seed for the kinds of things that you want to talk about. The other aspect of that is to, again, read and take a look at what's going on. Aim high. I guess this is what I would say about this. Just aim high. Look at something that's, you know, someone that you admire in terms of writing, and try and figure out why it is that you admire them. Okay. Take a look at, you know, something that you are absolutely wowed by and take it apart. You don't need any special knowledge to do this. All you need is your intuition and a willingness to try and just the Morocco story, please.
Okay.
Yep, just Morocco. Uh, try and take it apart. What's going on here? Why does this work? Again, wow, cool. The questions you want to ask yourself are things like, why? Why does this work? Why am I entertained like this? Am I entertained by this? And it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that that's a Maya Angelou piece. I mean, we kind of respect her as a writer, but maybe the story doesn't work. Maybe the story is set up in such a way that doesn't appeal to you. The other question that you want to ask yourself while you're reading someone else's work and thinking about producing your own is the big question, the one big major guiding question, which is disoriented. So what? That's the thanks, Vanna. The major question you want to ask yourself as you're plotting through this and as you're thinking about your own work is, so what? Right? Why does my voice matter? How can I make it matter? What is important about this? What motivates this? What gives this a sense? Yep. And what gives this a sense of importance? And so what? What is the significance of what I'm reading? So at this point, since you've already started, go on and read through Morocco. And when you've finished reading through Morocco, I'm going to encourage you to work in pairs or triads or dyads or whatever dyads or triads, whatever you have there. And talk a little bit about, between yourselves, talk a little bit about what it is that you think works. And try and answer that question, so what?
Thanks so much for that. That was amazing. So much information and a lot to take in. So I'm going to open up to questions now or discussion. If there's anybody who wants clarification from any of the panelists about entry.
All right. So, presumably you've all had a chance to dig through this a little bit. So the first question is very simple. What did you like about this piece?
Anybody? What did you like?
I really liked all the juxtapositions that were in the story between her and her life in America, going to Morocco, what she'd expected to see, what she'd actually seen, bringing back the memories of her grandmother, and that was really powerful. So that sense of tradition and tradition meeting modernity, the unexpected twist in the story, which I really liked, and you could really empathise with her. I've been in Morocco and I've actually had a bottle of Coca-Cola with a number of flies in it and wouldn't drink it. So there was a bit of a personal thing there as well. Yeah, and there's probably a lot more besides, but I'll let other people talk as well.
I think I like the part that she was sick for 1 month, thinking she had swallowed cockroaches, only to learn later that there were raisins, and really her being sick was just a figment of her own imagination. She didn't swallow cockroaches. What was in the cup was raisins.
Yeah, I like that contrast of the cultures, where she was, wearing the short skirt and high heels in Morocco, and then she realised that, that's not what you're supposed to do in Morocco, and how she dealt with that, and trying to fit in and with the culture and be respectful of the culture. I think that was quite powerful.
Ladies, anybody else?
I love the historical part of it, in that she told her sort of positioning in the story as a historical, context. The grandmother was there with her as part of the past, so in all of her current activity, she was framed by the past in some way, and I thought that was quite powerful because it gave depth to the time backwards as well as her time forward, which was obviously being sick for a month, which I thought was quite cool. Yeah.
I'm going to contribute to this one and say that one of the things that I particularly liked about this was the structure in terms of time, moving back and forth. I also like the structure in terms of the setup. This is a very classical joke structure, and it's one that's pretty easy to access as a creative writer. So one of my, let me move on to a different question though for everybody. Do you think this is good writing? Is it good?
Is the writing good?
Yes. Yes, it is good.
Why?
Because of the way she behaved, and because she responded in different kinds of languages. That's the English, French, and Spanish.
Good, no good? Ooh.
I actually think it was very good. It very quickly set the scene. It was it was descriptive, but not in a boring way, and it was really evocative. You could imagine yourself being there. You could imagine what you thought you would be thinking if you went to Morocco, and then what you actually do encounter. You could imagine your own discomfort being inappropriately dressed, and it very quickly came to some sort of resolution. Well, I don't know that resolution's the right word, but it very quickly made its point, and it did it very poignantly. It was, and it was very, I mean, it's only short, it's only 3 pages or something, and she managed to fit so much into that 3 pages that you would take away with you and it actually would make you think about the way you approach situations that you're not that you don't normally encounter and how you interact with people. So yeah, I thought there was a lot in there, and she did it really quick. She did it really well in a very short piece. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Sarah, that the economy of this language is so impressive, and I think that's something to think about. You know, instead of delving into more and more words to make your point, how can I, you know, take something? I'll show you a graph in a few minutes, but how can I take something that is very effusive and melt it down into something that's pointed and organized? And that's, you know, having a daily writing practice is something that would help you do that. You can write as much as you want, and then of course going back and sort of listening to yourself, going back and looking at what you've already written, and sort of picking out the things that either you remember after you go back to something you've written a day later, picking that out and turning that into a story or the story, and sort of jettisoning that, getting rid of the rest of it, or some way of sort of narrowing down and again getting to the heart of the matter.
I think the way I look at this is when you try to send a text message and you know that, well, in Nigeria, you get billed for every text. It's in the US, I have unrestricted text messages. It doesn't happen in the US, in Nigeria. So when I want to send a text message, I know that if it goes above, I think it's 160 words, I will have to pay for a second text message. So I might type that first one and I have like 3 text messages. Then I'll go back again, and at the end of the day, I realize I actually got my message across in 1 text message. But now I don't even have to think of that, because it doesn't matter even if it's 10. I just keep sending, knowing that I have unrestricted text messaging. And so it's an interesting way of looking at sending the same thing in a short and succinct way, as opposed to just telling a long, winding story.
So my last question to you is, do you think that you could write something like this? Do you think that you could? Simple. Might just be a yes or no.
Yeah, I think we're all capable of writing, of good writing, but it's writing something that we're passionate about. You know, having a story to tell and being passionate about that story, and the creativity flows on from that.
I'll say yes. But it's how to start. For me, that's the challenge. You know, you have the idea, you know what you want to write, you have the story in your head, but just putting it down, it's something, just can't, you know, before you start, you know, okay, yes, I want to do this, I want to write this beautiful story that's on my head, and when you get the paper and the pen, you just don't know where to start.
Sure.
So I think, yes, it's something I can do, but there's that but that's still there.
Right. Yeah. The tricky part of my question, I guess, is that I'm having you look at a finished product, something that's been refined and edited and published and all that other stuff. So, you know, where do you start? Well, let's try and imagine where, you know, Maya may have started in writing this story. And I guess you would have to say, my answer to that, to your question, Tayo, is start anywhere. You know, in academic language, it's what we call the zero draft. It's something that you write, it's a brain dump, right? It's something that you just put anything down, everything down on a particular topic that you're thinking about. So maybe you're trying to answer the question about what does woman-centered mean? As kind of a language that we're hearing around the area today. So what does woman-centered mean? What does woman-centered human rights mean? So just anything that comes to your mind about a particular topic is perfectly fine. It can go on a piece of paper, it can go on your computer screen. It's just horrible sitting there looking at a blank screen, right? The white paper staring you down. So start anywhere. Put a word on there. And I'm going to share a little graphic with you from Austin Kleon. Thanks. who's written a couple of books. One is Steal Like an Artist, and the other one is Show Your Work, and I really like it. And what I'm going to show you comes from a chapter he calls Share Something Small Every Day. And that means to me, produce, not only are you going to share something, you have to have produced something small to share, or something large and then pull a small part out of it. But his sort of concept of that looks a little like this. He calls it Sturgeon's Law, and it's a pie chart. Okay, can you see the pie chart? Where he has got one section labeled crap, right? Literally crap, and the other section's labeled not crap. So this should give you a sense of the percentages that you're working with, and this is why, in many cases, in every case, writing something small every day, keeping in mind what you're reading and why you like it, because what you're essentially doing. Would you like to have a seat? I'd like for you to sit down if you want.
Come.
Have a seat. Come on up. Okay. This is why, keeping in mind and have what it is that as a writer you might want to achieve, or where you want to begin. Where you're going to begin, I'm telling you, where you're going to begin is going to be somewhere way far afield, and that's okay. You're going to zero in. You're going to zero in as you continue to write and work. So, eventually you can have that usable, tasty piece of pie that says "not crap" for you.
Yeah, if you're a photographer, an artist, writer, whatever you want to be, to get one of those excellent photographs, you need to take 1,000. To get one page on a beautiful written book, you have to write and just keep writing. And it doesn't matter what comes into your mind, you just write it down and you'll get small snippets of what you desperately want to convey. And it takes time. And be patient.
Yes. Be patient with yourself. Right.
So you're saying we can become bestsellers overnight? I thought they said some people write one book overnight and it's a bestseller. Is that a myth?
Yes.
It's a lifetime of study. And believe me, you just have to talk to people, discuss life in general, write down small notes as you go along, and everything will come together.
Thank you. And actually that brings up the sort of second leg of listening to others. You can use others as examples of what you want. You can use others as, a source for sparking ideas in your own mind. And you can also use others in the sense that you share your work. I talked about this a second ago, sharing one small thing every day, whether you post it on a blog, whether you put it in a journal, whether you put it on literally on an old-fashioned postcard and send it to someone. Anything that you share is should do that with the mind that you're open to feedback, that someone's going to say something about it. They may say something that you don't like, and that is okay. But part of this process in listening to others is being able to discern, and listening to yourself too, this is where they overlap a little bit, is to be able to discern like what is valuable feedback for you as a writer, and what is feedback that's, maybe I don't need to worry about this too much. Somebody's going to give you some comment about your grammar, and that's fine. Okay, so that's an easy fix. But when somebody's sort of talking about what you are thinking and how you're expressing yourself, it can be personally, it can feel a little weird, and it can bite a little bit personally. But you ultimately have the control over what you're working on and what you're writing at various stages. So. Again, listening to others, but I recommend taking that with a little bit of a grain of salt, and less, not so much that, but taking it with a sense of your own intuition about what works, what's going to work, because you know your goal. If you're sharing small snippets of things and you haven't shared your overall goal, that could be a little confounding to people. Thanks, Morolake. But be open. And the only way to be open to feedback is by having something there for people to give you feedback on. Excuse the dangling preposition there. So what do? How do I get the juices flowing? And that's kind of back to Tayo's question. And we have one more comment. Excellent.
Have a notebook next to your bed. If you wake up and you have a thought in your mind, write it down. If you have a dream, anything, just write it down. And the next morning it may be the catalyst of the next book.
Thank you. That's absolutely right. That's back to the anything. The read anything, collect anything. Anything that you see or experience is game, fair game. The problem comes in if you're representing other people. Anything that, picking up their stories and their experiences and turning those into something fodder for activism can be a little bit tricky. Obviously, you want consent on those issues. You can present that story anonymously. You can fictionalize that story in different ways. You can present an aggregate story in which you are talking about sort of a composite picture of people. That's probably the most respectful way to do that in terms of presenting information and community stories in a way that's going to be both powerful, effective, and respectful of the person whose story you're taking.
Be respectful of the other people's stories and don't plagiarize.
Very good point. Don't plagiarize.
Well, you can give them all out because this is going to be a disaster in about 2 seconds. Okay. So. Oh, okay, there we go. Thanks. She's having a hard time keeping up with me because I'm just stretching mics. One of each. Yep, one of each. There's 10 copies of everything there. So listening to yourself, listening to others, listening to yourself, again, be open to feedback. Be ready to sort of jog your mind at any time. Listen to yourself in terms of what intuitively appeals to you. Listen to yourself in terms of what intuitively is going to come out of your mouth or out of your mind onto a piece of paper. Again, writing for me is a process of clarification, distillation, I guess, refinement. It's something that goes from that big, massive pool of things to something sharper, basically. It's cathartic. It is therapeutic, processing, healing. It gets you in touch, with the emotional aspect, perhaps, of the stories that you might be collecting or might be using for any activist project. It helps you find the power there. The thing, though, that you want to know, perhaps, is in terms of getting started. Where do I start some days? Well, some days, the only writing that you might do might be something like one of the exercises that Morolake is passing out to us now. And I'll give you an opportunity to just play around with one of those. A creative writing process always requires that you kind of go out on a limb somewhere, I think. That you try and find prompts or cues that are far afield so that you can just totally open your mind and release whatever it is that's hanging around in there. It could be very dark. It could be very silly. There's nothing that isn't okay when you're in the midst of doing one of these sort of creativity boosters, if you want to call it that. There's nothing that isn't okay at that point. Even if you are primarily a business writer or an academic writer, even pulling one of these things out and playing around with it before you do your sort of proper writing practice, or if you're working on an article, I need to write 2 pages today. So I usually pull one of these out and play around with it. And, it makes a significant difference in how I'm thinking about how to solve the problem of what to put on the page, because I'm not feeling boxed in anymore. So once you get one of these, feel free to choose any one of the exercises that are there, and I'll tell you where these come from so that I'm not accused of plagiarizing. I'll tell you theft. Tell you where they come from. The article, the exercises that you see that are in fours, that are split up into quadrants, and the ones that have the sort of silly questions, all come from the 642 things to write about. This is actually a book that's designed for quote-unquote young writers or adolescent writers, but I find a lot of them, basically they have lots of questions about school. But you can kind of pick through and find some really interesting ones that should release you a little bit into the writing world, into the world of your own mind. And one of the things I actually like about this text, aside from partly because it is written for adolescents, is that it gets you into potentially into that sort of silly space that you might not be accessing on a regular basis, okay, as a writer, or even as a beginning writer, or as a journaler, as a person who does a daily journaling practice. Okay? So it gets you into that silly space, and that's good. And then I have an additional one that I'll share with you that's a little more serious, and that one comes from something called Now Write. And that's a focus on nonfiction. You can combine your creative writing practice in service of any kind of nonfiction or journalistic writing that you're doing. So I'm using this as kind of a basis. The basic practices are helpful in any way. So Now Write, and that is edited by Sherry Ellis. And what this is actually a collection of writers talking about a little bit about their practice and then sharing with you an exercise that they do before they begin their work, either for the month, the week, or the day.
So you want us to do anyone?
Yeah, just go ahead and do any one, and then I would actually like to hear some of your results. So this is your opportunity to produce a little bit today and to share a little bit today, and consider this the kind of kickoff to your daily practices.
Where's the camera?
My camera's in my backpack. So, of course, when you're doing this on your own, you have an opportunity to make it as detailed as you wish, or as short as you wish. Part of the keeping a daily practice, especially if you have a particularly busy schedule, it's either get up at 3 in the morning and do this for 2 hours. You could do that. Or, stay up until 4 in the morning. Or, give yourself a time limit for the day. Or make sure your time is short. I have 5 minutes. I can commit to 5 minutes. And in 5 minutes, I can do one of these exercises. I have 15 minutes. And in the 15 minutes, I have 2 seconds today. I don't know what on earth I'm going to do. I keep a journal, so I'll pull out my journal, or I'll pull out my date book, or whatever it is I have, and I'll put down one word that struck me today, just one word, and that does constitute a daily practice. And even sometimes, it's not even about writing something. Sometimes it might be about doing a scribble or a doodle, anything that sort of is in your head that you want out, or even if you don't. Yes, I want that out. Do a journal. Do a doodle. That's okay. It doesn't have to be a word. It doesn't even have to be a real word. It could be a totally made-up word. Oh, here you go. Yep.
One of the things with myself living with HIV, and as I like to think of myself as a writer. I'm sort of in the final stages of a book. But I've also got a single mother with 3 young children, and I just find I get very tired. My best time for writing is in the morning. Fortunately, I'm in a situation where I can work from home, and so I'm not having to get up in the morning and do the mad rush of going to work and coming back, in the afternoon. And if that was the case, I wouldn't write anything. Because I find that by the time I've fed my children and they're bathed and into bed, that I just don't have the energy to do anything. I have no creativity left in me at all. And then the other issue is dealing with distractions. It becomes like, particularly writing a book, you have to be really, really focused, and it's taken me a long, long time to get to where I am now, because I've had to deal with so many distractions in my life. So what's your solution to that?
Well, I think, as you've already pointed out, and I'll probably have Morolake speak on this as well, as you've already pointed out, life is complicated. And in particular, we are complicated as people. So we have a lot of things going on. So what's my solution? I'm tired. I don't know what to do. I don't know what I write about, what to write about. I'm not sure when I'm going to have time to write. Again, I think just finding that few seconds, even if it's just a few seconds, to write something, anything. That's one way to tackle it. Clearly, I've heard people do various things. Some people choose to go on vacation with their family, and that's great. Some people might choose to go on a personal retreat. And take a week, and on that retreat, do nothing but write. And that's huge blocks of writing time. That's not how I operate. Yeah, that's not how I operate. What I find is that I do need to set up blocks of time, though, for myself when I can. And as you've already identified, your better time to do that kind of work is in the morning. So knowing those things about yourself, and then just simply committing to those is going to be probably your best path. The thing about writing is that you got to do it. There's not a way around it. You can't think it and then try and put it on the page immediately. It does require that sense of that those moments where you are putting things on the page. Go ahead.
One of the most beneficial things I've come across recently is the 500 word a day challenge. I've found that was, for 500 words a day for a month, and it's surprising how many words that you can pump out, especially when you set that personal challenge for yourself. You sort of do actually find the time.
Yes, actually, I like that. The 500 word, I use that as a journaling tool for my students. The other thing to think about with that one is that, exactly what you said. Those 500 words add up. I mean, you're looking at, do that every day for a week, and you can do the math, and you got plenty of words. Again, but also fitting into that time, not just the production, but also the kind of going back and revising. I think is the other key thing, because sometimes you write stuff down and you're like, I never want to look at this again. But doing that as well, fitting in that, yes, I wrote these 500 words, I wrote these 7,000 words, now what do I do with them? So taking, sort of assuming that same practice of the 500 words a day and go back and look at what you've done, and then how can you make those into 500 better words is another part of that practice. I know we only have a few minutes left, so a couple of things that we want to do. I'd like to have you share, and if you have questions about publishing as an activist, certainly feel free. We'll hang out over there, and we'll give you some tips and advice about where and how to sort of move along your publishing practice or your writing practice, and where to put those words once you've polished them a little bit. But in the meantime, I just want to do a quick roundy with folks sharing some of the things that they've written.
Who wants to share?
This is a sound. I've got two boys, and I hear laughter every day. And I wrote bubbling, gurgling from the belly, right out loud, boy laughter, which I really love, and I'm missing this week. Yeah, me too.
I did the same one as you, which was describe a sound you hear every day, and I wrote trains. A low mumbling through the silence of my slumber. I stir in the space between dreams and waking. Is it a dream? The 3 a.m. freight train. The 5:23. Commuters starting their day. I roll over, pull the covers around me, grateful that my working day is still hours away.
Now I'm intimidated. Okay. I also wrote about the sound. I wrote prayer, because that's what wakes me up every morning. The sound from the public address system. And when I hear that every morning, so I wrote prayer being said every morning through a public sound system. And I don't want to say everything just to be. Then I wrote about my name. I actually wrote all my names. Temitayo as being strong, beautiful. I wrote my other name, which is Abidemi. Abidemi means that my father was not available when I was given birth to. So I said, lovely. Motsurayo means I don't know how to do that. And I say that to be joyful. So.
My first answer is the most important smell. I love the smell of perfumes and sardine, and the sardines and perfumes, and the sound I hear every day is song. Then I described myself in 10 symbols. Okay. Okay, I'll leave that because I don't know. Then the question which says the king shows up on your doorstep. Then I wrote, I'm gonna welcome him and make sure he feels very much comfortable. And the worst thing I've ever eaten is is salad. That's the worst.
Salad. I like the one about think of your name and writing words. You know, I thought that was quite good to just sort of get the kind of energy going. So my name's Heather. So it's like happy, energetic, active, time poor, healthy, everywhere, relentless. Because I feel I'm relentless in trying to achieve my goal, and I think that's the thing. It's like you never give up, no matter what, no matter how bad you think your writing is. You just keep plugging away.
Yep. I write out my name and the letters of my name. And I also Temidayo, which means mine is joy, and my second name is also known as Esther, and I'm okay. I also had a Muslim name which is Rukayat, so on like that. Yeah. I describe myself in 10 symbols. I also write about the worst thing I've ever eaten. The food they sell in this place, I hate it so much.
You want to share yours?
You want to share yours? Sure, yeah. So, I chose to say, imagine what's below the streets of a faraway city I've never been to, and it's a river. It's like an underbelly in our dreams, where we get on boats so that we are free to imagine and dream. Because I think that above, even during the night, we don't allow ourselves to really think and imagine. So I need that underbelly to be able to imagine.
I have the letters of my name: Morolake. R for resourceful, O for outgoing, L for loyal, A for artistic, K for kind, E for excited.
I agree. No. So the last piece of paper I handed to you, you know, we think about certain writing projects as being ongoing and long and tedious and never ending. So the challenge, I guess, would be as you move into or as you go on with whatever practice it is, that whatever application you might have for your writing, whether it's journalistic, whether it's business writing, whether it's activist writing, in the process, you need to have some sense of your own story, developing your own voice, understanding where you've come from. And so this piece by Boric, Life in One Page, many of you will be asked as you sit on boards and so on, and move on and do more professional things, to provide bios, 500 words or less, and that sort of thing. So create for yourself. I think this is a good thing to have on hand, as early writers, and even as seasoned writers. A good thing to have on hand is your life story. You know, that kind of life story where, you know, you can fit it into one page. And I love the way that Boric lays all of this out for us and shows us how to write these things. This would be an excellent week-long practice or 5-day practice for you, right? So that you have something to go away with. And something to access. This would also be an excellent exercise if you were working with a community and asking people to talk about their own stories. And that's, I think, the other key feature in collecting the voices of other people is let them tell their own story. It's tempting to sort of edit things down to make them sort of snapshot or soundbite worthy. But the bottom line is that you need to have them tell their own story in the way, whatever way they're comfortable. So here's one exercise that you could do with other your community to create a community narrative, but also something to apply for yourself. Okay? And again, if you have questions about publishing as an activist or online publishing, we'll be right over there. And now we are done. Thank you very, very much, everyone. Thank you, WNZ and Pata Nigeria, for your support.